Good morning. I'm Matt Driskill, editor of Asian Aviation Magazine and AsianAviation.com. Welcome to the latest In Conversation. Today we're speaking with Mahesh Kumar, CEO of Asia Digital Engineering. Mahesh, welcome to take two of In Conversation. Had a little technical difficulty with the first take. Thanks for joining me.
Okay. Good morning, Matt. Thanks a lot for having me here, and thanks a lot for bringing this up, on ADE, and hope we can have a very good conversation here.
Yep.
Without any technical disruptions.
Well, these things happen, and again, this is not a Hollywood production, so we'll get through it the best we can. Again, give us a 50-cent tour of ADE, Asia Digital Engineering. You guys were set up in late 2020. You're providing MRO for AirAsia, other airlines when you can get those in. Basically, it started September 2020. A lot of things were going on with COVID. Tell us what was going on then with you guys and how things got started.
Okay, 2020, that was the start of where we all faced COVID. Definitely, there's nothing to hide that it was a very challenging time. It was very tough. But we took things in a very positive way. We thought we shouldn't waste a crisis. And before COVID, majority of our maintenance services were all outsourced. So that is where the whole idea came up with, where, why not we start to reduce the outsourcing and try to build the in-house capability. So what we did was we created a lot of automation processes. We came up with a lot of digital transformation. We cut down all the processes, and we started up a very lean and simple structured MRO without any huge overhead or heavy startup costs, exactly like how Asia used to be 20 years ago. In one liner, the simple way to explain ADE is to provide the maintenance services at a very low cost without compromising the quality and safety of airworthiness.
I want to talk about the digital side of things. I mean, everybody talks about digital transformation these days. You talked about it when you were announcing the company, Industry 4.0, automation, big data, predictive maintenance, machine learning, AI. Of course, that's pretty much standard now in the industry. Rolls-Royce is doing it, ST Engineering is doing it, the manufacturers and everybody else. First of all, what makes ADE different in this respect? And secondly, I mean, I'm old enough that I used the first browser when it came out, and I used Windows 95 and things like that. So that tells you how old I am. But part of the problem with, you can have all the digital processes you want, but then you've got regulators that still require reams and reams of paper documents. How do you reconcile those two?
Okay. Before we go to that, I mean, let me explain the most important thing here. Of course, AD was started in 2020. Okay, we are fairly a year old, but again, AD is part of Asia's engineering department. Basically, we carved out an engineering department from an airline which was operating almost 20 years, with close to 250 planes. So we had a massive years of experience in maintaining the aircrafts and relationship with the OEMs and of course the authorities also. In other words, we have actually proved ourselves in excellent turnaround time the last 20 years. So that's where we carved ourselves out. And the second thing is any other players which you have just highlighted and all like that, most of them, they are not associated with an airline. Either they are a standalone MRO or they're associated with the OEMs or whatsoever. But most of them, they are not associated with an airline, especially with an airline with this size of plane. So that's actually a huge advantage to us, to ADE. Because number one, if at all you're starting an MRO on a standalone basis without any base fleet, you got to have a huge customer acquisition cost. You got to look for customers. You got to subsidize. You got to spend a lot of money to attract those customers, which we don't have. There are MROs where, for the first 2 years, the hangars were empty without any customers and all like that. It's quite challenging to build that, which we don't have. We already have proved ourselves before as part of the engineering department, and now we are bringing it out, and we have an immediate customer. That's how I would say. Just to go back on the numbers side, if at all you look at the annual reports of Asia Group Berhad back in 2019, that's a public information. Just for maintenance and overall, we used to spend about 1.3 billion ringgit. Again, that's a public information. So that's the amount which was spent. So, just imagine, with a rough assumption that, we still continue to outsource about 60% of that amount, and we are trying to do 40% of it in-house. So that's about 500 million ringgit of immediate revenue, which ADE is going to get, which it will be very tough and challenging for any other MRO, which is going to start from day one. That's one advantage for us. Second, on top of it, the assets, the rotables, the inventories, or whatsoever, and all like that, which we have for all these 250 planes. That's a big advantage also compared to any other MROs around this region, which we can definitely monetize by entering into pooling services, tradings, and whatsoever, and all like that. And the next part of is any other MRO here is usually, if at all you look at it, they used to start from, mostly in Singapore, and then they will try to expand themselves to any other parts of ASEAN or even the wider Asia or any other major hubs. But the advantage with ADE is, as part of Asia, we have a strong footprint in ASEAN, meaning to say we have covered the major airports, the major hubs in ASEAN region, name it as Bangkok, Jakarta, Manila, Bali, or whatsoever, and all like that. So we don't need to have a new startup cost, a new timeline to build our footprint around, or to have an expansion plan where we can naturally have a transition process from the existing engineering department in these hubs to ADE. And the last bit of it, which you mentioned about the digital side, is actually the data. We have been operating the planes, and especially I can go deep down to Airbus and the A320 type for the last 20 years. So we know how the aircraft operates, what are the issues with the aircrafts, and what are the data of the aircraft in terms of the aircraft data and also the maintenance data. And now we have the service provider side. We have the airlines data and we have the service provider side. So before the aircraft comes for check, we exactly know what are the issues, and if at all there's some findings or anything which we are finding or any issues with aircraft during the check, we can exactly connect the dots to the operation side of it. That's actually the big advantage for Asia, and in fact that's a cherry on top of the cake. That will be the game changer if you have the both side of it. And that will be the biggest advantage compared to all the other points which I've just highlighted. Again, when you have said that, the regulatories or the authorities in terms of digital transformations and all of that, we can fairly say that the world is changing. Of course, aviation is highly regulated and is controlled by the authorities and all like that. But from before ADE came in the picture, if at all we look at on the airline side, where we were back in 2001 and compared to where we are at 2020 or today 2021, we can definitely say that the authorities around this region have been very, very supportive in terms of transforming the engineering department, in terms of transforming the aviation, of course, without compromising the safetiness or airworthiness of the aircraft. That part we can safely say that you cannot immediately jump how should I say, compared to any other field, aviation is highly regulated. So definitely there'll be a slow, definitely there'll be a drag in that. But again, the transformation processes in that is ongoing, and we can see a bright future on that.
I'm curious, you mentioned a few things about regulators, but I want to talk about that as well. You recently got approval from Malaysian authorities. I think you've got approval in India and Indonesia as well. And I think you're working on Europe. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. The first priority for us to cover the ASEAN region, and we are in the process of getting the approvals from the CAA Philippines, CAA Thailand, CAA Cambodia, and of course we are working on one or two other authorities also. Our first step would be ASEAN, but in parallel, of course, YASA comes in the picture. We are already in the process of getting YASA approvals.
I'm curious about India because India is another, I love India. I used to go there I've been there many, many, many times starting in the 1990s. It's one of my favorite countries in the world. You just have to embrace the chaos that is India. But it seems like India to me seems like a natural place to have an MRO base, but the government just kills it with taxes. I mean, they tax every single thing. And so you have a lot of Indian carriers sending planes out to the Middle East. I mean, do you think you can capture a lot of that MRO market in India?
Man, you'll be surprised actually. I mean, you've just highlighted how tough it is to get the approvals from the Indian authorities, but you'll be surprised. We got the approvals from DGCA India even before Indonesia. In fact, after Malaysia, India was the first approval we received. That's solely because, again, we have our connection with our sister company, which is AirAsia India, which is based in India. That was very helpful. And this is back to the question. That's the reason why I was saying that for an MRO who doesn't have an airline touch in any country would be a bit difficult compared to us who have already have an airline touch around this region. So back to your question, whether, are we going to capture the Indian market? Yes, we can immediately capture AirAsia India's market. And after that, definitely we'll expand. And we have already doing maintenance services for AirAsia India.
Quick question, kind of a personal question. You joined the engineering department in 2009. You helped set up the India Engineering Department in AirAsia Philippines. Is this your final spot with the company, or do you have your sights set on higher office?
I wouldn't say this is my final spot. At the same time, I wouldn't say I'm going to set on a higher office space and all like that. But I'll put it this way. Asia is a place where we always give the opportunity to whoever, despite whatever the age and all like that. And the way ADE is formed is we have both part of the team. We have young and dynamic, and we have senior and technical person. I don't know. I should put myself into the young or the senior age, but I could fit somewhere in middle. But Asia had never failed to surprise myself or anyone else. So there'll be always something coming up. There's always changes and there's always improvement here.
We talked about COVID a little bit earlier, and that's, of course, the elephant in the room still 2 years later. It's hurt everybody in the industry. You mentioned the pandemic in the beginning sort of kept you hemmed in a bit. We're starting to see borders reopening slowly. Malaysia's open now with Singapore, I think, or is coming up soon with vaccinated travel lanes. And Singapore is opening up with vaccinated travel lanes. So things are slowly starting to reopen because countries realize that they cannot shut down their economies all the time. Are you going to see an uptick in your business now that borders are reopening? Because you've got a lot of planes that have been sitting in the desert in Australia or in Arizona in the U.S. or other places. They're going to need to be serviced. They're going to need to be brought back into service. And you can't just flip the switch and they start flying again. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. Do you think you're going to be seeing a lot of that?
We call this as the good problem. I mean, this is actually the positive side of the problem. Of course, borders are opening up, operations are picking up. AirAsia as an airline used to fly about 3 planes for almost a year. And now we are flying close to 30 planes. And getting aircrafts back to operations is definitely not an easy thing. Right now, the current situation is the demand is way higher than our capacity. So that's the reason why previously we used to do our maintenance services at KLIA. Now we have opened up another hub in Subang, the old airport, and we'll be doing checks, hangar checks over there also. That's one of the creative steps we took over. That why not make Subang alive again and try to do services over there. But I would say this is something which all of us need to continuously work together, and it involves the supply chain, the vendors, the OEMs, and all that. It's the whole chain where everyone need to buckle them up, because things were pretty slow for almost 18 months, around this region, and now things are picking up back and all like that. And that's a very big news for us, where the demand is way higher than the capacity. That's the positive part of it.
So like you said, it's a good problem to have. I'm based in Singapore. I've been in Singapore for 10 years, but I've been covering aviation, been editor of the magazine and the website for about the last 5 or 6 years. And it's been interesting to me to see the progress that's been made here in Singapore, with Airbus, with Rolls-Royce, with all the big players here. They've got the engine shops. They've got the MRO facilities, private aviation, Bombardier, et cetera, et cetera. But it's interesting to see sort of the competition between Singapore, Malaysia, Vietnam to a certain extent, Indonesia to a certain extent. Malaysia, I think, is in a good... It's funny to me, Singapore always tries to compare itself to Hong Kong. And to me, there's no comparison. I used to live in Hong Kong as well for 10 years, and they're completely different cities, especially now. But in aviation, Singapore is sort of living at the top end of things, and Malaysia maybe not so much. But now I think it's starting to balance out, and Malaysia's starting to capture a lot of the service industry for one reason: you've got space. Singapore has no space. I mean, it has very little room to grow. Do you see Malaysia coming up the value chain in terms of aviation, not just with MRO, but with manufacturing and things like that?
Oh, yes, definitely. Malaysia is definitely ramping up on the aviation and aerospace industry. That's solely because of, we have, like you have mentioned, the space, the great infrastructure, and of course, the resources. And we are really glad that ADE is being part of this journey to become a premier aviation hub in ASEAN. And one point which you have highlighted just now, that when you have compared with India about tax and the support from the government and all like that, here in Malaysia we are seeing the government and the authorities are being very supportive. They're being very supportive. They want to grow the aviation business, the aviation industry in Malaysia. Competition will be always there. When just now you have mentioned about Singapore trying to compete with Hong Kong, or Malaysia trying to compete with Singapore and all that. So competition will always be there, and we welcome competition. It's actually a healthy competition in a way that it will boost ourselves. It will make ourselves to improve ourselves actually in a way. But we think that we have an upper hand, considering all the advantages which I've just explained earlier, that we can definitely stand a place as one of the major aviation players. Malaysia can really be there. We are being very positive on that.
Okay. Does ADE, I mean, you're experts in Airbus, of course, since that's basically the only plane you fly, that AirAsia flies. You talked earlier, though, about working for other airlines. Any customers you can mention that you're doing some work for now, or is it still, or have you signed an outside customer yet?
Oh, yes, we have. We are giving support for Myanmar Airways, and we have signed a few agreements with few airlines. China Airlines is there, Lanme is there, and we are working on with few more airlines. But just back to on the way we are providing services. One advantage of AD is we cover all the all the sides of every aspect of the engineering services, meaning to say from line maintenance, from base maintenance, workshop, the component support services, from engineering support services. I mean, when I say engineering support services, from the camo side, from the DOA side, and of course the last bit of it from the digital side. So before we go to the aircraft type, even from the engineering services for an airline, we have covered every single boxes. We have ticked all the boxes. So that's one advantage of ADE. Second, when you have mentioned about aircraft type, yes, we are definitely looking at more than A320. We already have our approvals for A330. We are closely in touch with Boeing, and from Airbus side, we are also looking at the A350s, and from Boeing side, we are looking at the 737s and 787s.
Okay.
We do not want to restrict ourselves just with A320s. No, that never happened. We will, and we are going to expand.
So if I get rich and buy an Airbus business jet or a Boeing business jet, I can bring it to you for servicing.
Definitely, man. Definitely.
Yeah, well, that'll be the day when that happens. Mahesh, finally, it's been tough for everybody the last 2 years. Nobody's been traveling. I haven't been traveling. I've been stuck in Singapore. You guys started sort of right in the middle of things. What are you looking forward to now? Is there a bright spot out there that you're looking forward to? Is it the borders reopening, planes getting back in the air? What are you looking forward to, say, the next 6 months, the next year?
Oh, the next 6 months will be just getting aircraft serviceable, not just for AirAsia, but also for other airlines. I mean, every single airline around this region, they want the aircrafts to be active back. They can see the light at the end of the tunnel. They don't want to miss the bus. They want their aircrafts to be ready and serviceable. So that will be the sole role for every single MRO, not just AD, but for every single MRO around this region to just simply get all the aircraft serviceable. And again, like I said, that's the good problem. That's a good challenge to go with. But again, the restriction in terms of quarantines and all like that is a certain drawback. Meaning to say, for example, let's say if you send an aircraft for a check, if the check is going to take up about 2 or 4 days or whatever, but the country or it can be Malaysia or the country which coming in. If there's a certain quarantine days where the crew or the engineers need to be quarantined here for 7 days, and when they go back they got to quarantine themselves for 7 days or whatever, that would be a hassle. I wouldn't say that's a showstopper or whatsoever, but that's definitely a challenge. It's a pain which we can see that, because previously you can see that we used to send our aircrafts to Guangzhou for C check. I mean, imagine Malaysia is here and we used to fly all the way to Guangzhou from Malaysia for C checks, and that was something very normal and common those days. But now, if at all you can think of that's going to be something very difficult. I mean, imagine bringing your aircraft to Guangzhou and your crew, and after that, once the aircraft's serviceable, then bringing that back. You can imagine the process before and after, not about the checks or whatever, but the process before and after. That is the challenge which we can see that things got to improve. Well, not just for AD, but for overall MRO industry.
Let me ask a quick follow-up, because I saw a good headline in, I think it was the Wall Street Journal the other day. A lot of chief executive officers are rethinking their supply chains now, and they're starting, because it used to be, okay, we'll do this just-in-time production, and so I'm getting components from this place, I'm getting components from that place, and they would all arrive at the same time, so they didn't have to store a lot of parts on site and so on and so forth. And what you just mentioned, that to send a plane up for a C check to Guangzhou or something like that, do you see a lot of countries building more companies like yours, where they would be, so that they don't have to rely on crossing borders and risking quarantines?
We see that, but again, I mean, if at all they are going to build something from the stretch, that will take some time, and it is not going to help this short period of during this period of getting the aircraft service. So we see that happening, but that is not going to help the current situation, because what we are talking is about today or the next 6 months, getting aircraft ready for the next 6 months. But if at all you're going to build a new facility and an MRO from the ground, from the basis, that is definitely going to take another 18 months or whatsoever, like that. Expansion is a different part of it, but if at all you want to select a country and you want to build from the scratch, that will not help the current situation of getting the aircraft serviceable.
Okay. Mahesh Kumar, Chief Executive of Asia Digital Engineering, thanks for joining me in conversation.
Thanks a lot, man. Thanks. Have a good day.
You too.